Hello, I'm back for another video. I got some good feedback in my previous one, but I'm going to do this new one here in a slightly different style. I'm going to speed things up and I'm going to give just rapid succession of very brief, very specific observations. I've had about 6 or 7 hours of experience just of doing VR stuff so far, and I'm a pretty analytical, observant guy, so maybe you can learn about something that you haven't seen talked about on subreddits or anything like that right now. I'll be totally out of breath by the end of this because I'm going to do it all in one take, but I'm up for the challenge. So right away, I'll just point out again that this is a stereoscopic 3D video. There's a few different methods of watching it in 3D. You can do my favorite, which is just the paralleling of your eyes. So it's not crossing your eyes, it's making your eyes do what actually happens when you're wearing a headset is left eye is looking at one image, right eye is looking at the other image. And you can naturally do this just by holding your phone up with this video running, focusing your eyes on something that's way behind your phone, then without changing the focus of your eyes, move the phone in front and the two images will merge together into one three-dimensional one. It is something that you can train yourself to do. It's not something that like, oh, I wasn't born able to do it, now I can never do it. So with some practice you can do it, because I couldn't do it and I taught myself too. Or you can use any number of these lower end VR kinds of experiences, but they're still very valid and very fun, easy to do. Google Cardboard, which there's tons of variations on these. It's just very simple, put your phone inside and it does the paralleling for you. You should try to get the Google Cardboard 2.0 version or whatever they call it. It'll be most noticeable is that the lenses will be way bigger than the first version, so don't waste your time with the earlier ones. And this also has a capacitive touch button, which is a much better solution to doing screen touches than the magnet method that they had previously. So make sure you get one that looks like this on the front than any other one. There's also lots of weird plastic and other versions too. Or if you have the Gear VR, download an app called Package Disabler, which will turn the Oculus Gear VR software off so that you're able to use this like a really good cardboard. So this is probably the best, most crisp experience that you could get when a Google Cardboard kind of style for viewing videos like this or any other stereoscopic feeds that you find of videos on the internet. Alright, so now that that's out of the way, I probably won't be doing that every single video, but as people are kind of new to the idea. So the big disclaimer, just because I'm noticing all these really specific things about the headset does not mean that I'm complaining. I actually really enjoy the Vive. I've had crazy amounts of fun. I don't regret purchasing it and being an early adopter by any means. So these are not complaints per se, they're just little things that I've noticed about it. There's plenty of videos about people's really prolonged, passionate opinions about the Vive, but I'll save that for another time. So right away, I found a way to compare the Vive to something that you've probably experienced outside of VR. So when people say, what is it like to wear a headset or to wear the Vive? And I'll say it's just like wearing a scuba mask. If you go like this and press this against your face, kind of with your eyebrows and your jawline here, this is what it will feel like, that you'll have this kind of vignette, this slightly obscured view. That's about the extent of the field of view. And think of it when it's a little bit foggy. Scuba masks always get a little foggy inside and might get some wear. And that's just the difference in resolution with the Fresnel lenses inside that try to prevent that, but it's still noticeable. It's something you get used to, but they'll be more crisp and more focused in the middle and things that are in the center of your vision. Then they'll blur a little bit from the outside. So you'll definitely notice it as you look around and things that are up close to you, is that it'll get a little bit more in focus and then you move it to the side, it'll be slightly out of focus. And part of that is because your eyeballs are moving inside the headset. That's why it's similar to a scuba mask, is that, you're looking around inside this device that's on your face. And you'll never completely get over the feeling of it pressing against your face. It may become less evident, but you'll still always feel like you're kind of swimming underwater in a sense, which I guess makes, underwater games that much more immersive. And of course, the adjusting of straps and moving things up and down and all of that repeatedly is all very similar in that matter. And another thing is that the looking straight down and looking up and doing any kind of extreme movements like that will make the headset slide slightly. That's part of why you're always going to be readjusting a little bit. So this was noted in Giant Bomb's 11-hour Vive stream, is that when you look down, just the weight of it will make it slide ever so slightly, so it'll be a little bit out of focus. And you'll find yourself doing a lot more of like bending over and looking down rather than just looking down, because with that idea of the center of the lenses being more in focus, more clear than the bottom part. And another thing people ask about is the screen door effect. I'll say that that is not a problem whatsoever. Like, even when I had the headset on for the first time, I saw some pixels, but it just went away. There's too much to be looking at, too much. If you're looking at a solid color, you'll probably notice the grid of the pixels. That's about it. It is not a problem. Even with like Gear VR and stuff like that, it's just never been a problem for me anyway, because your stuff that you're engaged in and you're looking at, it's not going to be a distraction. So that is not a problem, in my opinion. And the second aspect is that I think comfort is essential to VR. It's at least half of the experience. Any sort of prolonged activity that you have, the comfort of the things that you're wearing are very important. Like if you're going out jogging, if you're doing any sort of prolonged physical thing, it's always important that you're comfortable, that things have the right amount of tension, the right amount of slack on your face. So it's definitely worth spending the entire first day of your VR experience, several hours and all that, just getting all the straps and everything just right. Because you'll have these weird subliminal kinds of things that happen where you'll just start getting a headache. I had this happen for a while. And I'll be like, oh no, I'm getting a headache, and is this because just VR gives me a headache? But no, I think the reason for that is that if straps or any sort of tension on your skull will give you sort of a headache feeling over time. And one thing that alleviated that is that when you look in the back of the headset, that it has this sort of net-like thing. And the point in the back of your head where your spine meets your skull, there'd be kind of this little bump. I don't know the term for this bump, but you want that to be right inside here. This is like a net that should catch the bottom of your head. Then everything else is in front and kind of not sagging, but it's important that this is far down on the back of your head, not up here, but back down. That's an important part of comfort. And anyone who has a Gear VR, this whole system is very similar to the Gear VR, the two side and then the one front adjustment. So there'd be a lot of like Velcro pulling off kind of things. But the one on the top gets to be a little bit trickier. This is something that I noticed right away. I was like, how am I supposed to do this? Because you have all of the wires that are coming out here that are going inside, and then it's like there really isn't room to adjust that so much. So what I'm finding is actually easier is to take the headset off, adjust everything symmetrically, and then put it back on your head. Rather than having it on and making the adjustments while it's on, this way you have a much more clear idea about how much more or less you're adjusting things. So comfort is extremely important to VR. Otherwise, you might be claiming that it's making you uncomfortable for reasons that are just a matter of the straps on your head, other than just the sight and experience of VR itself. Okay, so the next subject is that the chaperone system, I think, is way more important than anyone ever realized. That virtual reality wants you to be unable to decipher the difference between real life and a digital reality. It's about the blending of the two together and fooling your mind in as many ways as possible. So to alleviate the worry that you're going to break something is very important, and that's what Chaperone does. So when you're measuring your Chaperone bounds, make sure you're not brushing your controller against a wall. You don't want the Chaperone to be your wall. You want it to be the warning that tells you should slow down. So think of it like a yield sign. So yeah, it should be about like with arm's length, and then think about like another controller in addition to that. So like about this distance, that the Chaperone should be probably another foot. That's like where you should measure your space. So this is going to be sort of a bold statement, but from having used the Chaperone system for a while, I can say that if you stand in the middle of your space and you're able to, with the controllers on, and you put your arms as outstretched as you can, which I'm going to be out of the view here, and then you just spin around and you're unable to touch anything, if you have that amount of space, you'll be able to play probably 80%, 90% of all the games that are out there. Most of the experiences don't really have you just straight up walking around as much as you'd think. There's a couple of them out there that do take advantage of that, but vast majority of all the experiences will just have you standing in the middle of your space and then sort of anchoring one of your feet to the middle and reaching out a little bit. There won't be as much walking around as you'd think, because many of the games and good developers will have multiple methods of moving around. We'll use the teleport method. Like the lab has you have a small kind of teleport destination and you move around that way. And you're just sort of moving within that center point. So as long as you could just put your arms out and spin around in a circle without hitting anything, above you too, ceiling fans. Like I can't even reach the light that's on my ceiling right now, and that's good. So you can feel safe in playing most of the experiences if you could just do that within your Chaperone area. And also, I just want to point out too, is that when you move a controller near the Chaperone wall, it'll light up for that too. So you'll find yourself acting like you're moving around in the darkness in a way that if you're sensing that there's going to be a lot of movements, I've found myself just sort of like drifting to the side and like, oh, okay, the wall's right there, and just sort of moving back and in and out. And you can enable an option in the Steam menu that allows you to turn on the actual Chaperone camera, and then you'll actually see your room. But you won't rely on that nearly as much as you'd think you would. I only ever turned it on if I needed to do something in real life that required seeing, like for reading my watch, for an example. If I was like this, able to read the watch and opening windows, or maybe like doing something else, but that's the only time I ever needed it. Just the invisible bounds or the visible bounds of your Chaperone space was more than enough for me. Okay, so here are some way more specific observations. First of all, these are USB headphones. So if you use USB headphones, they will work with the Vive, and that will so let's see, because there is a USB 3 port that's empty that you can plug them into, and that's what these are plugged into, and it worked exactly how it did if I plugged it right into a computer or something along those lines. So I'm not actually using the headphone port that's on here because I'm using the USB. So now users of USB headphones will usually have some sort of an external sound card that plugs in the USB, and that, it looks a little awkward, but it sits perfectly fine up here. It's light, doesn't get in the way. And everything else just weaves into the system and goes along the back of the headset. One thing you want to make sure is that there is some slack between where the sound card is and where the cable comes out. I had experiences in Audio Shield where just putting the headset on just yanked it out. So you always want there to be some slack on everything. And speaking of slack and things like that, that's another key experience in VR, or key aspect that's important, is slack on cables. with anything that involves lots of physical movement all over the place, like I was saying with comfort, is you want lots of slack. You don't want any of these things to be pulled tightly. You want everything to be a little bit more bunched up in spots. And a primary example is with the entire cable setup here. I was a big proponent in the beginning of saying like, oh, I'm going to mount this on the ceiling. You know, it's going to be a big problem having it on the floor. I'm going to trip over it and all of that. And as a major skeptic of people saying that the cable is not a problem originally, I can safely say that it's not a problem. You notice it. It could be a problem, but it very much was not a problem in all of the experiences that I've had so far. It just becomes sort of a second nature. You'll feel it all the time. You'll feel it running down your back. So it'll be a constant reminder that it's there, but it won't ever be like, oh God, no, oh, I'm tripping over it. So you actually want as much cable as you can sitting at your feet. That sounds kind of the opposite of how you'd imagine it being, but you want to pull all the cable in and just have it kind of bunched up below you. So when you have the headset on, that you're stepping on it. You know it's there, but the cable's very sturdy. It's not going to break as long as you're not wearing very sharp shoes that might cut the cable, but your socks and bare feet are not going to break this cable. It's very sturdy, and you'll see that the coil or the cable will coil up. It'll do this sort of like twisting ring thing. That's actually desirable because it weights it down to the floor. You don't want any cables stretched like this, because then that's when stuff will get caught. You want it to be bunched up flat on the floor, and that is the ideal situation for the cable management. So now getting a little more specific here. This thing was a pain to move around. This little trap, I don't know what to even call it, this little piece of plastic here where all the ports are plugged in here. I can foresee this being something that someone would eventually break. So if you're planning on frequently pulling things in and out of the headset all the time, you're going to have to be very wary of this thing. I don't know if I dare take it off live, because just my luck, I'll break it. Because you have to pull it forward and then out. And I didn't actually see any instruction about that originally. There. So I push it forward, and then you have to keep pushing it further and further, and then lift. And this is what it looks like underneath. This is where all of the cables are attached, and they have these special 90-degree turned cables that are designed just for the headset. And then the additional USB one, you'll see that way in the back. So actually getting this back on, you have to, let's see, you push it way in front, because there's 3 latches that need to all be hooked. Start with the side 2, because you're fighting the tension of the strap while you're doing this. And then you, there. Whew, okay, got that attached. So that is kind of a pain. If you're going to be unplugging, plugging things in over and over again, you got to really practice this, make sure it's right so you don't break it off. So that was something that I found a little annoying. Now another thing, these are very hidden. This is where you adjust the depth of the lenses. These like little ears that are on the sides, you don't just twist them straight away. That's what people were saying. They're like, oh, how do you adjust it? Oh, you just twist the things on the side. I'm like, no. And I was worried I was going to break it. It's like pushing it really hard and it wasn't coming off. But this is what you have to do. You grab it and you get on camera. You pull it up. It snaps up, it unlocks, and then you twist it. But I believe it comes as close as it possibly can, so you probably won't even need to adjust it. Next little observation, the IPD adjuster right here, this little knob, This will change the distance between the lenses. Very subtle. We're talking like sub-millimeter adjustments. And everyone's IPD, the interpupillary measurement, is slightly different. So when you have the headset on, you'll be twisting this around. You see a little thing that appears on the screen that says the exact millimeter distance between your eyes. That's something that you can probably memorize. So with future headsets, you can be like, I'm a 60.3 or what, you know. So it's something that you can adjust. And a handy thing I found to finding if this is working, because it won't be immediately apparent if it's working or not. In VR, put this on, and you hold the controller right in front of your face, because you'll see the digital 3D model of the controller by your face. Then twist the knob, and then you'll see HTC written on the model of the controller, and that will come in and out of focus. So put it about like a foot, maybe between a foot and 2 feet away from your face, and just keep twisting it until you see the HTC letters come into focus. And that was one method that I found out to get that correct, because you won't notice it immediately. You're like, what? So that can make a really big difference. Yes, gaskets. By default, the Vive comes assembled with the wide gasket that looks like this. This is just Velcro. As you can see, it says wide face. That's its opinion of you, is that you have a wide face. But it has a little plastic thing on here that will actually clip into the headset. Then the rest of it's Velcro. So it comes on and off very easy. You can probably clean it. But I'm actually using the narrow one. I've always kind of thought of myself as having kind of a big head, but I'm actually using the narrow. And I feel like the narrow is much better in general. So right away when you get your headset, unless you find this very comfortable and that there's no light leaking in the outside, switch to the narrow one. That will be very helpful. And that's something too, is that when you're doing all of your comfort adjustments for the headset, you should do it in a very well-lit room. Like this room, I have very bright lights. And when I had it on my face, it would be extremely apparent if there's light leaking in by your nose or the sides of your eyes and all of that. So you should do this in a light room. And you don't need to be in VR per se to do these adjustments either. So you could go into your bathroom and make most of these adjustments. The other very tiny adjustments you can do in VR, like the IPD and with the lenses on the sides, but those are easy to do without being in the VR. Another thing is that the material that these gaskets are made from is almost exactly like a synthetic sponge that you would use to do dishes. In my opinion, they're not very good. Like they're literally body oil sponges. And I'm someone who's really sensitive to like greasy, sweaty body oils and stuff like this. And this is pretty disturbing. Like it just straight up absorbs sweat. I'm ordering a cover from vrcover.com. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be other companies out there, but that's really the only one that's specializing in exactly the Vive Gear VR, you know, the big headsets right now. And I'm in the US, in Minnesota, so it is taking a very long time for me to get the cover. It's been almost 3 weeks. I'm sure they're very back ordered. They have a lot of traffic. It's coming from Europe somewhere, so you should get a cover of some kind, especially if you're going to share this with somebody else, because this is straight up a sponge. It's not like the Gear VR. Gear VR, I believe, has cushioning with cloth over the top. This is just spongy material all throughout. I'll go clean my dishes afterwards with this. So that's my talk about the gasket. What else haven't I not talked about? Oh, here's another very specific observation. It's that the sensor holes on here are, you know, the kind of very characteristic aspect of the Vive is all of these holes. When I originally saw the design, I was thinking, oh no, when I'm putting the headset on, I'm going to be like not wanting to touch any of these because like I don't want to ruin the sensor. I don't want to get it all fingerprinted up. But like you can kind of see the sensors are not actually visible in the holes. They're completely flush with the rest of the plastic casing. So they must have like a partially transparent material or something that allows them to work. So you don't even have to worry at all when you have the headset on about like just grabbing this whole thing and moving it up and down. I mean, might break the tracking for a little bit or something like that, but in general, it's completely flush and smooth all the way around. Same goes for the controller. It's flat. It was something unusual that I noticed. Another observation, these are the headphones that it comes with. They are specialized for a headset length. You will not have any other application for these unless like your phone is attached to your neck or something like that. I mean, you're not going to be listening to these and like, yeah, this is my jam, with them with a tiny little cable like that. This is made for a headset, and that's all it's going to be for. And they are the in-ear style earbuds. They're not on the outside like some of the older iPod ones. They're actually going inside your ears, and I can't personally wear these because they just fall out. They come with different sizes of covers on them, but I couldn't do it at all. I need over-ear headphones for any kind of comfort and reliability, at the cost of it being very hot after a while. And another thing, am I going to make it through here? I can't. It's over 15 minutes now. So with the headphone jack on the back of the headset, this is a headphone jack. It is not a headset jack. So it only has left and right ear for microphone. It does not have an additional ring for a microphone. So if you have headphones that have a microphone attached to them, you will lose your ability to use the microphone with this. Now, the Vive does have its own microphone, but it's pretty poor quality. It's cool that it's there. It's helpful, but you will lose your ability to use the microphone if you try to use this with your headset. That's why I have a doubled cable. I have my microphone, my binaural microphone actually, wrapped around the headset that came with these headphones in this like crazy intersection that's happening on my back. And it weaves all the way through it and to the wall, and it's been working very nicely. So if you have a good high quality microphone that you want to use, be prepared to get a huge microphone extension cable to reach your computer. So now that we're talking about microphone related things, with any sort of movement heavy, you got to be worrying about the wear of cables. Now my extension for the microphone has this piece of metal, which is very heavy. Originally I had the heavy part at the bottom, and the microphone at the top. So I'd always have this weight that was pulling as I moved around and jumped on it. That's very bad in the long term for the cable. You want the heavy part to be on top, and then you want the microphone cable to come down and in so that the weight, there is no extra pull on it, because the lighter one is on the bottom and the heavier one is on top. So make sure you do that. Another important observation, recommendation, save your twisters. The Vive has like 20 twisters that it comes with because there's a whole lot of cables in here. Save these twisters. These will be a lifesaver because everyone's going to have their own solution for putting headphones on top of here. Like for me, I have this whole like braided thing going on here. Twisters will be a lifesaver because you don't want to use tape. Taping these on here will not allow movement in slack. Slack is very important with lots of movement and stuff in VR. Twisters will allow the cables to move a little bit. If you tape them together, you're probably going to run into problems with stuff like ripping and just long-term wear. That is kind of the key word here, is long-term. You won't immediately notice it, but in the long term, it could have some pretty bad effects. So save your little black twisters. They'll be very handy later. Speaking of cables, the whole headset comes with tons of cables, and they're very nice quality ones. I didn't actually see anybody comment about this, so I was pleasantly surprised, is that these aren't just run-of-the-mill stock cheap cables. They're specifically HTC branded ones. So as you can see, it says the HTC logo on there, but they're thick. They have kind of a waxy coating, thicker than normal. The connection between the cable and the actual head of the cable is very rigid. Like, these are going to last a long time. They're not completely black either. They're kind of a slighter gray. In this particular one, this is the adapter for charging the controller. And the graphic designer in me is very proud of what they did. Every cable has a little tag, you can see. So if you don't read any of the directions, you can just read all these little tags and it'll tell you where everything goes. You'll have a bunch of USB cables, you have a bunch of HDMI cables. It actually says, like this HDMI, connect to link box. So this is for the link box to the computer. This USB cable here, it says connect to 5-watt adapter. Here's the 5-watt adapter. That is amazing. That makes the whole process very easy. And the link box itself is color coded, has little orange rings that you plug into the orange ports. It's just so streamlined and easy to do. Now, I'm running out of breath. As long as we're talking about cables and things, this is actually connected to my lightbox, or lighthouse right now. The adapter for the lighthouse is horizontal, like this. So it is very common in America anyway to have vertical outlets. So if you have one on the top and you plug this into it, you'll have room on the bottom. But if you live in one of those weird houses that was in that HTC video where all the plugs are at side by side, this will take up a lot of extra space. Actually, if you're just using a power strip, just depending on the design of the power strip, this could overlap a second port. So anticipate that your lighthouses will need horizontal space to plug into, which is normally fine for everybody. But be warned, the USB plugs like this should work fine for any orientation. They don't have a lot of extra space on them like that. Okay, wall mounting. These are the wall mounts that come with it. I'm not using them. I'm using tripods, but these feel very adequate, very good for what the purpose is. They're entirely made of plastic, except for the little metal bar here, but it's a very thick plastic. I can't even begin to bend this. So this is very sturdy, and this here twists, and it's a ball socket rotation. It's perfect. So then you just tighten it at, whatever degree angle that you need to orient, and then it has the little threaded mounting piece. 2 holes on the top for both the screws. Comes with, 2 of these. Comes with 4 screws, and I believe, let's see, screws are 1 3/4 long and which is about 4.5 centimeters. So you have the screws, and if you're a master carpenter and you know like what these plastic things are, it comes with 4 of those too. I have a feeling I know what they are, but I can't think of it offhand. So there's that. And a couple, I think this will be my final set of observations, is explanations about why the controllers are designed the way they are. And this just makes me just think like, wow, they put so much thought and effort into this. I was wondering like, why are there 2 grip buttons? And I was like, what, am I going to have to just be pinching both as I'm using it? Like, that's not very comfortable. You know, I'm going to be like trying to squeeze 2 at a time. And that is not what they're for. It's because these are ambidextrous, meaning any hand can use either one. Pick it up and it just works the way that it needs to. But there's 2 buttons because you'll only ever be using one at a time. You're not using your palm to press the button. You're using your fingers. So if you see when I grab the controller, you have your finger on the trigger, and then the other middle finger will be touching this. So when you have your entire hand on it, I am pushing that grip button, trigger, grip. I'm not pressing the other one. So it feels a lot more natural once you realize that. Every one of your fingers is doing something on this controller. There are no leftover fingers. Ring and pinky finger are holding the controller. Middle finger, grip button. Pointer finger, trigger. Thumb is the touchpad, which the touchpad clicks. So it moves all the way around, and it also clicks in 4 different directions, which the tutorial will show you. Then you have the menu button at the top, which your thumb will be pressing. And then you have the Steam overlay button on the bottom. And I bet something you didn't know is that the controllers actually make noises. Let's see if you can hear this. So the noises aren't utilized in-game ever. It's just so that you know they're turning on and off. And they also make a noise when they unsynchronize, or when they turn off too, because I had these sitting on the other side of the room, and they'll turn off eventually if they're not being used by themselves. And I heard like, biddy, and like, but it turns out that they make a noise when they shut off. And then there's also like the light indicator that's on here too, that will show you, here, it just turned off. If it's synchronized or not, and when you plug it in, it'll change color depending on how much charge it has. And when you're in VR, the controller will be perfectly one-to-one model, except it adds a battery gauge here. It'll have 4 green lights, and it'll show you how many lights or how much is left of the charge. And it'll show left and right hand symbols. So depending on the order that you turn these on, I'm not entirely sure this is how it works. It'll determine left or right hand once they're turned on, and you'll see a hand symbol that will just look like this, that will appear on the model so you know which one is which. And did I forget anything? The video is already almost 30 minutes, good lord. The link box comes with a little adhesive pad on the bottom that you can use to stick it to stuff. I wouldn't recommend that because I feel like you need a lot of slack on everything. So I guess I'll end with my final remark is that you should save the box. This has been very helpful. This is good, thick padding, especially for the Lighthouse boxes, which are pretty fragile. You'll want to save all of these, and especially like this. This is the cover that the box came in. This is a very nice like display thing. You can set this on a nightstand somewhere and just set everything in it. This is padded and everything. And there's also one for the headset, and then one for the 2 controllers as well. Wow, I think that's all of my current observations. I may have another one later. So if you have any questions that you'd like me to address, you can comment about them in the YouTube video, or you can message me on Twitter, or on Reddit. I frequent the Vive subreddit. And I'm also on Twitch. I'm going to be doing a bunch of live streaming of the Vive. And I am The Monotonist on all social media. So twitter.com/The Monotonist, twitch.tv/The_Monotonist, on Reddit, The_Monotonist, and YouTube, I'm what you see below. So ask me anything, I'll answer anything. Watch my stream, interact with me, and hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope if you survived all 30 minutes of it. Those are my observations on the Vive. I'm sure I'll have more in the future, and hope you enjoyed the 3D. And have a nice day, and Vive is amazing. Thank you.